What is up, guys? This is part 3 of the engine assembly series that I was doing. And basically today we're going to cover putting the heads on the block, torquing everything down. Yeah. So yeah, pretty simple. Basically here's the block, nice and decked and clean, assembled. And here's the heads. Fresh from the machine shop. I've already checked the lash on these. They've been decked, cleaned. Pretty simple build with GSC valves, springs, retainers, Viton seals, and brass guides with stock cams. So yeah, again, you know, just more for reliability. Nothing really too crazy in the power department there. So yeah. I'm gonna go ahead and put these on the block and go from there. So the first step is to take a rag with a little bit of brake clean and just clean this deck surface. Make sure it's nice and shiny. Alright, so clean rag, some brake clean, and just kind of clean the surface of the block. Next, you're going to install the studs, but before installing the studs, you want to blow out the holes where the studs go and just make sure all the debris and whatnot is clear from there. Alright, so that's done, and then you're going to take some nice head studs. I use the ARP ones. Pretty basic, pretty inexpensive, cheap insurance to stop you from blowing head gaskets. And those just go in here. And you want to tighten them down until they are bottomed out by hand. Next, you're going to put the head gasket on. Again, for builds like this, I just use the OEM, SUBARU, MLS head gasket. It's more than good enough, and you want to make sure it's lined up correctly. I have seen people put these on backwards, and basically you clog this or close off this oil port, and the car will blow up. So boom, there's the head gasket. Next, you're going to take this assembly lubricant that comes with the ARP head studs, and you're going to apply a little bit to the threads of each head stud. And I like to just use a rag and kind of spread this out evenly. Throughout the threads. The next step is going to be to install the head onto the block, and to do that you are going to basically do the same thing we did to the block, and that's clean the underside of the head, so this deck surface here, and make sure all the contaminants and dust and whatever else is gone. But also, if you've sent your head to the machine shop, it's going to come back something like this in a little bag, and it may even have the valve cover on it. So basically the first thing you're going to do before you install it is remove the cam caps and the cams, and that will allow you access to the holes that the studs go through. So yeah, you just take these off, and then all these will come apart. Alright, so this is how it looks like with the cams removed. As you can see, there's a lot of assembly lubricant inside the buckets. This is an area that oil will not really flow to, so it's a good idea. Before I put everything back together, I use a heavy-duty grease, assembly grease on these, and that just ensures that this stays lubricated on the first startup. So I'll clean this off, put the grease on before I put everything back together. So now we'll clean the surface where the nuts are going to go onto the studs, and we will clean the surface of the head. Alright, so the deck surface is nice and clean and shiny, so we're going to install this head onto the block. Alright, so we've got the head nice and clean, and it's just going to line up over the studs and slide down onto the block. And there's little dowels. So once those get lined up, the head will sit flush onto the head gasket, and you can start to bolt everything together. And it should look something like this. Again, you know, make sure that you've got the right side head. The exhaust is facing downwards. Alright, so the next step is going to clean any manufacturing residue off of the nuts and the washers for the ARP stud kit. And the easiest way to do that is with like a solvent or brake clean, and just kind of spray that all around, and then you can flip these guys over and get the other side. So yeah, once you want to have these free of any oil or lubricant, just nice and clean. And once you do that, you're going to put assembly lubricant, the ARP assembly lubricant, on the face of the nut. You're going to place these onto the stud in the head. And those are ready to go, and now we can start to put the nuts on top of them. So all that's left is to torque these nuts onto the studs and then reinstall the cam and go to the other side. So ARP has a 3-step torque method. Basically it's 30 foot-pounds, 60 foot-pounds, 90 foot-pounds in a special sequence. And I like to follow that. I know some people that do 60 to 90 or 30 to 90, or you know, you could even do just straight 90. But I like to stick to the guideline of stepping up in increments because it helps with distortion on the block in the head. And distortion you kind of want to stay away from boosted cars, so you want to have as little distortion as possible. So yeah, I'm gonna hook this up and torque it down, and then do the other side. So again, I like to use the fancy electronic torque wrenches. You could definitely do without it, but I think, you know, you just get a much more accurate measurement with these electronic ones. So yeah, this is the way to do it. So that's 30. Do that in sequence. And so this is how it should look, more or less, once you've finished torquing everything down and setting the cams back in. I like to bolt on the rear caps just so the cams don't fall out and so the buckets don't move. So there's the stud and the nut. Everything is torqued down, and you're basically going to flip it over and do the same thing on this side. So yeah, it's not super difficult. This is, you know, a pretty quick guide on how to do it. If you have any questions, feel free to DM me on Instagram, AWDPat. And yeah, hopefully you enjoyed this video, and we will see you next time.